So I was kind of tossing up whether or not to see Love, Simon, and I'm glad that I did because it's pretty hard not to love Simon. That was a joke, I think. So Love, Simon is the first studio film directed by Greg Berlanti, and it is adapted from the book Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I think I got those names right. In this story, we follow Simon, who is kind of a standard 17-year-old American high schooler who has one very big secret, and that is that he is gay. Simon hasn't come out to anyone, no one knows this kind of secret, he's kind of bottled it up, and when he finds out that another person going to his school is also kind of in the closet, he kind of gets this ongoing online relationship where neither of these two people know each other's identities, and this relationship kind of inspires Simon to begin to take charge of his life. Now, this movie is pretty good, and I think that kind of comes down to two things, which are authenticity and accessibility. And I want to start by talking about accessibility. Now, if you're a fan of this channel, it would appear that I seem to have a thing for gay romance films. I think that the best of them are really, really excellent, and some of them are my favorite films of all time, including movies like Carol, like Moonlight, and like Call Me By Your Name last year. And I think that they are deeply, deeply accessible, not because I relate to the central kind of homosexual conflict, that's not relatable to me at all, but what I understand is the exploration of human and these human things that we all go through that lens. But those films are not necessarily accessible to the general public because of their delivery. They're much more kind of artistically inclined with all these very, very deep layers to them that require kind of a bit more type of an analytical meta viewing, as well as that visceral emotional one. Now, where Love, Simon succeeds is the fact that its delivery is completely accessible. It's designed as a crowd pleaser, and that in its own regard is incredibly impressive because you have a film about this kind of marginalized story that we don't really see a lot of films with gay central characters where it's just a casual thing. It's just like, yeah, they're gay, that's the story. And it succeeds because it focuses on relatability, so it puts up all of these kind of scenarios like with friends interactions and all these kind of awkward things that you go through in high school that you've seen in other kind of coming of age kind of teen comedies, I guess, like this. And that just makes it accessible to a wider audience, and it also never really bunkers down on being a gay movie because the ideas at the heart of it of kind of testing yourself, of challenging yourself, of finding out who you are, of kind of having this support network, finding the right friends, all of that is relatable to anyone that watches it, and that's why it kind of feels so accessible. The other thing is authenticity here. While I don't think it nails what teenagers talk like, and I don't know whether that's just because I'm raised in Australia and that's kind of a bit more of an American thing, I get this film as kind of, I think it's PG-13 in America, because obviously I feel like teenagers swear a lot more consistently than that, like it's just a non-stop thing, and this film probably only has 1 or 2 F-bombs in the entire thing. Really well placed, mind you. I was like, I think they've only got a couple of swear words they can use, and they deploy them really effectively. But something about the way it's constructed around relationships and around those kind of intimate moments shared while people are driving, while they're going out and getting food, it kind of seems to find those moments in between without necessarily nailing them in the way that kind of an art indie film would. It definitely has this kind of focus on constructing really, really endearing characters, letting us get to know those characters, and then getting those kind of interactions between them to just kind of flow and feel incredibly real. And that makes it a really, really kind of, not immersive experience, but an involving one. I definitely get involved with the characters. Now, the performances here are very, very good from everyone involved, considering it is still a studio film. The script definitely gives people a lot to work with, and while there are some decisions that did feel incredibly cliched, including that kind of thing where friends turn against each other towards the kind of third act of the film, which just seems to be a thing in all of these movies, and it didn't feel particularly necessary in this one. I feel like knowing who his friends were, it wasn't necessarily needed. It just felt weirdly kind of contrived. But anyway, back to the performances. They are all very, very good here, particularly from Nick Robinson, who plays Simon. Just a lot of texture. There's a lot of kind of stuff particularly to do with his frustration that really, really works. I think he really, really brings out that kind of uncertainty and the frustration that comes with that. Katherine Langford also does some good work, as well as the actors playing Simon's parents, Jennifer Garner and Josh Duhamel. They have scenes at least that are really, really strong. They again thrive on the kind of moments in between, which is when we see them. But once we kind of have these kind of big kind of scenes with them, they are very, very effective. Tony Hale also appears as the incredibly awkward, desperately trying to be cool school vice principal. As I'm in the middle of watching Arrested Development for the first time, it was incredibly entertaining watching him do that kind of thing where he's just so weird, but his comedic timing is incredibly effective. As well as Natasha Rothwell, who plays the school kind of drama teacher, I guess, who's incredibly entertaining. Her role doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of texture to it, but she's just incredibly entertaining every time she's on screen. She's just someone who's completely fed up with these kids, how useless they are, and calls them out on it all the time, and it consistently makes for really effective comedic moments. I also want to give a shout out to the soundtrack, which is kind of like a heavily electronic, modern, but also 80s sounding sound. I don't really know why that choice was made, but at least it makes for a soundtrack that, while may not be memorable in terms of I can't remember any of it kind of beat by beat, it did definitely stand out in the film and was definitely gave it a really strong drive. That's another thing here, is that the pacing of the film is very, very strong. It never lingers on a scene for too long or drags it out past the point that it's beyond being intentionally painful. So I really, really respect it for that. It just kind of clips along and is always focused on being an entertaining movie first and foremost. That is definitely gonna, I think a lot of younger audiences are really gonna latch onto this one. It's not particularly stylish either, but it does have enough of kind of like recurring motifs that it uses. You're like, oh, I've seen that shot before, and then it recontextualizes it with a different meaning, and I think that stuff is always really effective. But look, overall, I think the movie is good. I don't think it's outstanding. I was surprised by it, but at the same time, I was kind of expecting, you know, I was like, oh, it's gonna be a fine movie. It is emotionally endearing. You do kind of get your tear ducts kind of tickled. I'm not going to say that you're necessarily going to be streaming tears in the way that other movies in this kind of subgenre are capable of getting used to do. And it does have a very awkward ending. It kind of has a triumphant moment and then it unwinds and it kind of just ended and I was like, oh, okay, that's alright, that's done. But I think as far as this being a studio film, I'm glad it exists, I'm glad it was made, and I think that literally anyone that watches it will be able to get some form of enjoyment out of it, because in some way, shape or form, you will see yourself in maybe Simon, but maybe in some of the other characters in the film as well. It's just one of those relatable kind of high school films that, even though it may not feel entirely accurate to your own high school experience, it does have a level of authenticity to it that is incredibly impressive. So if I'm going to score this film, I'm just going to give it a 7. I think a 7's kind of a clean score on it, but I think a lot of people are really, really going to love this movie and probably enjoy it much more than I did. I did enjoy it a lot, but I just don't think it's necessarily an amazing movie or even pretty much a great one. So that was my review of Love, Simon. Have you seen it yet? Did you hate it? Did you like it? Did you like this video? Of course you did. If so, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel down there somewhere, and you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter, all at Breaking Banter. I should probably change that outro without Jay here and come up with my own thing. I'll get to work on that at some point.